Do you guys think that eating meat is sustainable?
I believe so, yes.
No.
No.
Probably not the rate that people currently consume meat.
I was reading something the other day and it said I think it was over 80% of resources go into making food. Like for meat, we only get 18% back in proteins and stuff.
If you live in Northern Ontario and you hunt a moose a year and you share it with your entire family and friends, then maybe. On big industrial farming, no.
I think if you're mindful of where the meat comes from, how much water it took, that kind of thing, I think you can sustainably eat it, yes. I try not to eat a whole lot of meat, but I wouldn't say like I'm a vegetarian.
I'm not a vegetarian, but I try to reduce the amount of meat that I eat.
I need a piece of meat every once in a while, once a week, a couple pieces of fish, and the rest is vegetarian.
Yeah, the cows and other animals produce methane, but like so do we, so we can't blame it all on the cows, right?
Now, sure, it's become a lot more industrialized now. There's a lot more people and there's a lot more animals that are being produced, but
My name is Jared James, and I run Timberline Farm. It's an environmentally friendly grass-fed beef operation. I raise 100% grass-fed beef. Two main breeds. One is called Speckle Park, and that's a breed very similar to Angus. And then I raise another breed called Wagyu, which is a Japanese breed known for its meat quality. I've been doing this. I've been a registered farm business for 6 years. This is my 8th year living out here on the farm. To me, sustainable agriculture is a lot of things. There's environmental sustainability, there's resource sustainability, there's business sustainability, but I'd say what I'm going for is ecological sustainability. The way that our food system works, it doesn't leave a lot of space for wildlife. What I'm really trying to achieve here is a farm that puts food on people's plates while giving wildlife a place to live at the same time. When somebody is eating meat, there are two sides to the sustainability of that, or two sides to the decision. One is the environmental side and one is the ethical side. So it's hard to say that the meat produced on an industrial scale in our diets is produced in a way that's treating those animals the way that consumers want them to be treated. The large production barns, it's not that they don't care for their animals, because they have to. They have to make sure that their animals are healthy in order to protect the bottom line of their business. Going inside that barn, the consumers are going to understand it. If they see steel and concrete as opposed to grass and trees, it's really hard to understand that that animal is still being cared for. You really have to decide what level of animal treatment you're okay with. But then the tricky part about eating industrial beef from an environmental perspective, or industrial meat, is that when you produce, let's say, beef in an industrial situation, you're feeding them crops from a monoculture. So you're taking those monoculture crops that have their negative environmental side and then actually reducing the amount of protein and food that's available to the end consumer by then feeding it to animals. So that is really hard to argue against, that red meat is good for the environment, or at least that it's not bad, because it is, in the bulk of production, definitely worse than just eating a plant-based food in terms of environmental sustainability. But the alternate side to that is that animals, when used properly, can actually increase the sustainability of a farming system by making that farming system more like a natural ecosystem. There are no natural ecosystems that are just plants. There's always animals eating those plants and then other animals eating those animals. It's those natural systems that are the most sustainable over time. Grass-fed beef requires a grassland ecosystem. By creating an ecosystem that supports cows, I've given home to all sorts of other animals.
This field is where I have the bobolink nesting area.
So I signed an agreement with the Ontario Soil and Crop Improvement Association to manage part of my fields for a bird called the bobolink, to provide nesting habitat for it. They're a grassland species that has been in extreme decline. I've planted over 3,000 trees here actually. Most farmers see trees as something that's in the way. A grass-fed beef operation where my animals spend a lot of time outside, if they have shade in those pastures, they'll stay out there for more of the day instead of coming into the barn when it's really hot. The way that I've planted them in lines and in patches across my farm will provide corridors for animals to cross my property. Think of the prairies in the pre-Columbian era where there were bison roaming around. A type of animal very, very similar to a cow. The plants were sequestering carbon out of the atmosphere, the bison were eating the plants and returning that carbon to the soil.
My big pile of manure. Well, that is like straight carbon to put back on the land right there.
Well, give it some scale, you know?
Oh my goodness. That's a whole lot of shit.
A lot of carbon.
Lots of carbon. I'll have to cut that audio out.
Returning that carbon to the soil as manure, and then the cycle would continue. So those soils, those ecosystems naturally do what we're trying to do right now, which is remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. And without animals in that system, it would not have functioned in the same way.
There's a lot of discussion about in regenerative agriculture, about the role of livestock. It's really hard to have good soil without livestock. Traditionally, it would be the buffalo, on the prairies, dropping their urine and their feces in different places, walking through and fertilizing the land. And in other places that are really dry, they're like sources of water. So I think we really need to better understand those kind of dynamics.
There are a lot of misconceptions about farming in general. There's this misconception in the urban consumers of agricultural products that farmers are wantonly abusing the environment or abusing animals, but that's not it at all. The way that the agricultural industry has developed since the Second World War has forced farmers that used to largely farm like me to become more intensive about their production, to have their animals raised in a more efficient manner in terms of their resource use, and that has evolved into what we know as factory farming, but they're not in control of that.
How often do you go into barns? Probably not very often. So this is like 1800s craftsmanship, literally built by dudes with axes and stuff.
They're doing what they can to make sure that their farm doesn't fail when they're constantly being dictated the price for their own product by a market that they don't control. Large grocery retailers can just say to farmers, we're reducing the price that you're going to get for it. And so those farmers, if they don't want to go out of business, they need to find a way to make their food cheaper to produce.
I usually shop at Zara's or T&T.
On average, Sobeys.
Sobeys or Zehrs.
Superstore, Sobeys, Freshco, just what's in town.
Zehrs in Waterloo. Try to go to the farmer's market when I can, but I don't have a car, so it's really hard.
One thing is that if you're going to a supermarket like Zehrs or Metro or something like that, anything that you're seeing on those store shelves that's being marketed to you as sustainable, it is being produced on a very large scale, and guaranteed those eggs with the picture of a sunrise and a chicken standing outside are not produced in the way that you think they're produced. You're going to have to source it somewhere else. Pretty much you're going to have to try to meet that farmer and make sure that it's actually coming from what you see as ideal, especially when it comes to meat.
I think one of the benefits of living in Waterloo Region is that farms are not far away. If you look at the Taste Local, Taste Fresh map, and you can find out sort of where you can go and, aside from farmers markets, go and buy direct from farmers.